It was late on a wintry January night when at 7 years old, me, my dad, and Goober, the grumpiest dachshund to have ever lived, we arrived in Wichita. It had been a pretty slow and a treacherous trip down a winter drive from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We got here, we were exhausted. There had been a hard blowing snow and an ice storm in Wichita that had taken out a lot of the power in the city. And when we arrived at our small two-bed ground level apartment, we had no power, which meant that we had no heat. So my dad dug into the U-Haul. He pulled out some clothes for us to use as pillows and several furniture pads for us to be able to make a pallet on the floor and to be able to cover ourselves with. And that's how we started our life in Wichita, sleeping tight together on a concrete floor with no heat under U-Haul furniture pads during a winter storm. My dad had been a music teacher in Wisconsin, but there was no way he could afford to be a single dad in Wichita on a teacher's salary. And so he applied and got hired for an entry-level position with Beechcraft, and then a couple years later, he remarried a young woman who actually was still in college at that point. But the bottom line is that we were financially starting completely over. And so let's just say growing up, I ate a lot of Cheerios, macaroni, and fried chicken gizzards because they were so cheap and yet so delicious. I didn't mind, but where I really began to feel the fact that we were poor was about the 7th grade. I began to notice how it seemed like most of the kids around me had new designer jeans, awesome shoes, and their still married parents were taking them on ski trips in Colorado or vacationing somewhere stupid, cool. And then early in high school, it was like everyone was going to all these great concerts, which in my time, the concerts here were Van Halen, Poison, REO Speedwagon, which neither I nor my family could afford. And then add up to all of that, I actually started kindergarten at the age of 4, which meant that I was at least a year younger than all of my grades classmates, which meant that I was smaller, squeakier, and less mature, and all I wanted to do was fit in, and I never really did. And it was in this season of life where I began to experience this intense and isolating and sometimes overwhelming emotion of envy. And the thing about envy is you kind of end up hating you and everyone around you that has more of whatever it is that you wish you had more of. Looks, money, popularity, power, success, romance, love, family. And the sad thing is we never really grow out of it. It's why we have phrases like one that actually originated with the title comic strip from 1913, Keeping Up with the Joneses. The phrase is stuck for over 100 years because envy has been around forever. Just listen to the following definition, see if you can identify with ever feeling this way. Envy is a blend of unpleasant and painful feelings characterized by inferiority, hostility, and resentment caused by comparison. And that's our key word for today, comparison with others who possess something desirable that one lacks. Essentially feeling inadequate when comparing oneself to someone perceived as having a superior quality, achievement, or possession. Ever experienced that? So to give you the big idea up front today of where we're headed is that there is absolutely no win in comparison. None. And yet, the problem is, we all struggle with comparison. It doesn't matter your age, your gender, your nationality, your marital status. We all struggle to one degree or another with comparison. It's why we're doing this War Within series, The War Within, overcoming the emotions that compete for control, because all of us have 2 or 3 emotions that compete for control of our lives. And we learned from Jesus and King Solomon in week 1 that we need to do more than just behavior management when it comes to our daily lives and our relationships. Meaning, most of us do a pretty good job of managing daily our words and our behaviors, and that is until we suddenly find ourselves under pressure, or surprised, or angry, or afraid. And then we say and do things, and it's like, wow, where did that come from? And Jesus said, well, I'll tell you, it came from your heart. It came out of you because it was in you all the time. And the reason this is so important that we're taking a few weeks to talk about these is because when the emotions that we're talking about begin to exert control and influence in our lives, it's not just us that gets hurt. Others suffer as well. Always the people closest to us and the relationships that matter most to us, they end up being hurt and they suffer as well. It's why in his wisdom, the second wisest man to have ever lived once wrote, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." And that's why Jesus would later say to us, "For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, false testimony, slander, arrogance, folly. All of these evils come from inside and defile a person," he says. That every word and action that is immoral or it hurts us or it hurts others, it begins with a thought. And when we hurt others, that what it is in God's eyes to defile ourselves because we have hurt someone else. Your greatest regrets, the words and the actions that you so desperately wish you could go back and take back and undo, they began with a thought. And so we just dare not allow these destructive forces that are within each one of us to gain control and eventually come out of us and undermine our success in our marriages, in our relationships, in our futures, in our dating, whatever it might be, which is why we are urged to do something far more significant than just managing our behavior. It's something all of us need to learn to do. And if you're a parent, one of the best things you do is teach your children to do this. And that is to monitor your heart, to monitor what's going on the inside. Because what's going on the inside eventually is going to come out on the outside. And all of us, if all we do is try to put a filter on our behavior and on our mouth, from time to time, as you well know, we all fail. And we'll be like, "Oh, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to do that, or I didn't mean to say that." And we treat our actions and words as if saying something accidentally or doing something accidentally and then taking it back, like it removes the hurt. But it's just not true. If afterwards, in the parking lot, I accidentally back over you with my car after service, and I jump out and I go, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. It was a total accident." And you go, "Oh, if it was an accident, I'm all better." No, your leg is still broken. You need medical care. It's the same with our words and behaviors. So we're going to talk about this ugly emotion of envy. And envy may be one of the ugliest emotions in human nature. And we can put in the word jealousy. As one author put it, envy occurs when you lack another's perceived superior quality, achievement, or possession, causing you to either desire this unattained characteristic or object yourself, or wish that the other person did not have it. And that last part, in my opinion, is the ugliest part of envy. Like maybe there's that one friend or there's that person that you know and they're on social media and they're beautiful and skinny and have all the right proportions, or he's still got the six-pack while you've got a bag of ice over your six-pack, and you know, he's fit and successful and they've got a beautiful spouse and their kids are beautiful and you kind of hate them. But then some time passes and then one day they post a picture and you think, "Whoa, they kind of put on a little squish. Maybe got a little belly or a little muffin top going, or he lost his job and he can't afford to send their stupid kids to that private school anymore." Good. I mean, oh, that's so bad. I feel so bad. See, envy is this thing, and it's just so ugly that if a person we're comparing ourselves to, if somehow the person we're comparing ourselves to gets taken down a notch, it somehow makes me feel better about me, and it makes you feel better about you. And if you're an even halfway decent human being, you kind of hate that feeling within you. And imagine if we don't deal with that. I mean, where does that lead us? And we're about to find out. King Solomon, again, considered the wisest man who ever lived next to Jesus. He goes right at this. And he says, envy rots the bones. That's where it leads. It rots the bones. And in other words, when we're envious, we're focused on someone out there, what they look like, what they have, what they've accomplished, whatever romantic relation, who they're in a romantic relationship with, you know, how smart their kids or their grandkids are, how awesome their house is, how cool their car is. Solomon says you need to stop. Because at the end of the day, envy rots the bones. And ultimately, because it leaves us competing with people who don't even know there's a competition. And we never win. We're striving so hard to look cooler, look drive cooler, live cooler, be smarter, do better, perform better, be better than, but instead, it makes us arrogant if we are more successful and accomplish more than they did, or it makes us depressed and despise ourselves and them because we fall short. There's no positive side to envy, none. It rots the bones. It ruins relationships. It will make you a not very good friend, a not very good husband, a not very good wife or sister-in-law or brother-in-law or cousin or child or brother, sister, coworker, neighbor, whatever it is. So here's the application for today. Just knock it off. Just stop it. Like if only it were that easy. See, the problem is, that this isn't going away. I mean, we see something or we hear about someone, and involuntarily we just feel it. And we can't help it. And it doesn't matter how mature you are. Envy ultimately isn't a problem to be solved. It's a tension to be managed. Because we're human and we're fallen. And it's just natural to compare ourselves and natural to allow our self-esteem to be built upon what other people have and do rather than what God has called us to have or do. So the great news, Solomon, he gives us a way forward and a place to go mentally when you inevitably find yourself once again drifting emotionally towards comparison or envy or jealousy. Here's where you go, and I'm hoping as a result of your time of hearing this morning that this phrase and this imagery that he gives us will become so instilled in your thinking that from now on, you'll have a place to go when you, again, are dealing with all this to help you win this war within, one battle at a time. Here's what Solomon writes. He says, "And I saw all toil, that is, all work, all labor, and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another." And this is King Solomon. He's the richest man in the world. He can go wherever he wants, do anything. He says, here's my observation. And it's a little bit of hyperbole. For the most part, he says, as I've observed people, everybody is competing and measuring themselves and their success by everybody else's. So, sound familiar? This was going on 3,000 years ago. And these next few words are the words that I hope that you'll just grab a hold of, internalize, and make a part of your internal vocabulary so the next time this emotion inevitably sneaks up, or you realize that you're fixating on someone else's quality or achievement or possession, that you'll use these words to confront this emotion within. He writes, "I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is meaningless or ridiculous." And then here are the words, "a chasing after the wind." And it's powerful imagery. I mean, chasing the wind is endless. There is no finish line. There's no peace. There's no ultimate satisfaction. There is no contentment. It is an unquenchable appetite because there is always an There is, because his is newer. Hers is nicer. Their kids are smarter. Theirs is bigger and his is faster and she's skinnier and he's richer, and there's always an and it never ends. And then to add insult to injury, you then never even enjoy your own qualities and achievements and possessions or relationships. It is dissatisfaction guaranteed if you chase the wind. Envy steals any joy from our accomplishments because there's always someone who is accomplishing more. So when you can't catch these emotions, your emotions to begin to go in the direction of envy, that's when you immediately have to step back and say, no, envy, not today. That's chasing after the wind. It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of my life. But on the other hand, Solomon, he was a very accomplished person. He was a world-renowned king. He had accomplished more in his lifetime than anybody has ever accomplished in their lifetime. He's not trying to bait anyone into being lazy or to do less or accomplish less. In fact, he said, fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. And this is his imagery of someone who just sits down under a tree, leans back, kind of folds their hands in their lap or folds their hands behind their head and is like, work is hard, life is toil, there is no win, why work, why compete at all? And Solomon's like, well, that's not the answer either. This isn't about being passive or not doing your best or trying to accomplish something. And then he brings these two ideas together. On the one hand, you don't stress yourself out trying to be someone you're not. And on the other, you don't just give up and do nothing. Then he gives us this more powerful imagery. He says, better one hand with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. He says, even if you have less than whatever it is that you feel driven to have more of, tranquility with less is better than having more with no peace, no tranquility, and no healthy sense of self. And tranquility is simply contentment. It's serenity. It's a peacefulness. It's reflecting on your life and looking in the mirror and reflecting on your day and going, I did my very best, and I'm good with that. And lying in bed at night, reflecting on your day, reflecting on your life, and feeling, you know what? I'm okay. I'm not anxious. I'm not stressed out because I'm not trying to be somebody that I can't be, or trying to obtain or accomplish things that maybe I wasn't designed, positioned, or called to obtain or accomplish. His point is simply this: less is actually more when it leads to contentment and peace. Peace with yourself and peace within yourself. And peace with yourself and within yourself ultimately brings greater peace with the people around you, especially the people who are most important to you. And you experience a word that we don't use very often: tranquility. I can't tell you how many times over the years I have known and worked with individuals where it's just there's something they have become so fixated on, just something they want that it just seems like everyone else around them has, but it seems to be eluding them. And you know what they do with the emotions of that? The emotions of envy and that driving desire for more of whatever it is that they feel they don't have enough of. They end up placing the weight of their unfulfilled want on the people closest to them. Where I've seen this most often is in marriage, where one or the other has this driving want and they transfer that pressure onto their spouse, and now neither one of them is content. And if they should have children, their children end up suffering the weight of that want as well, and it becomes a toxic wedge between two people because one spouse can't deliver, and the children don't understand why mom and dad don't seem to be happy any of the time. And many times the children, they end up feeling like maybe they're the ones doing something wrong. Better one handful with tranquility than grasping and striving and pretending and editing and cropping and retaking and retaking and retaking and retaking. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. No, that's not it. That's why some of you have gotten off of social media, right? It's just like driving you crazy. I mean, beyond just like the politics and everything, so you found yourself seeing some of these things, and it's like you get fixated on it. It's just like, I'm a loser, I'm a loser, I'm a loser, I'm a loser, my husband's a loser, my wife's a loser, my kids. Just like, I can't deal with this anymore. I need to take a break. Some of you have been wise enough to just decide, I'm going to take a break. In fact, here is my suggestion. Anything that stirs up envy and discontentment in your life, remove it. Just get rid of it. Now, I'm not talking about your spouse or your kids. Like, sorry, honey, Chad said anything that stirs up discontentment, man, you got to go, or kids, we're dropping you off to live with the grandparents, you make me discontent. Like, that's not what I mean. But I'm talking about that thing that just makes you feel less content. It may be something you subscribe to. A magazine, a website, it may be social media, but anything that stirs up envy, discontentment, jealousy, remove it. Because it's just feeding that thing in you. And it's going to continue to poison you and poison the people closest to you. Just get rid of it, cancel it, quit looking, quit talking, quit watching, quit scrolling, whatever it might be. Now, Solomon's not done. And now he takes us a little different direction. He says this: again, I saw something meaningless or ridiculous under the sun. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother, which means in this culture and context, he had nobody to leave his stuff to, because women in this culture, they couldn't inherit anything. So Solomon says, but I watched this guy. There was no end to his toil. He's working and working and working and accumulating and just killing it. And yet, his eyes were not content with his wealth. But then finally, this guy pauses and he asks a very important question. It's a question all of us need to ask from time to time. For whom am I toiling? Who am I doing this for? Really? Why? What's really driving me? What am I trying to prove? And here's the tough part. Who am I trying to prove it to? See, the question for you and me this morning, the question you need to wrestle to the ground is, why do you stress yourself out about everything you stress yourself out about? What's driving you to do everything that you do? Really? See, fathers and mothers will be like, well, I'm doing it for my family. Well, really? Maybe. But maybe there's a deeper answer to that question. Maybe there's more going on. Like, why are you doing this really? For whom are you doing this? Why are you striving so hard? Are you internally competing with someone? And in your comparison and you're competing, if you're honest, you're actually alienating the very people that you say you're doing this for. Which makes this a very important question. For whom am I competing? For whom am I toiling? For some of you, there's a name. For some of you, there's a face. For some of you, it's your father. For some of you, it's your mother. For some of you, it might be a deceased parent. Like you're still trying to prove yourself to someone who's not even around to see it. And you're internally striving and envying and desiring, and you're jealous for their approval and that pat on their head, and jealous for something we can't even get. And we've given up our one handful of tranquility because we've opted for striving and a chasing after the wind. And continuing on with this imaginary person, he says, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? I mean, have you ever had a moment where you think, I feel like I'm just striving and striving and striving and going 10 different directions at once and doing everything I can for me and for my family and maybe for my wife and my kids and my husband, and yet I'm not enjoying any of it. I'm not enjoying what I have. I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. And for some of you, you'd say, I love my friends, my family, my wife, my husband, my kids, but the fact is I never feel any real lasting peace about my time and about my relationships. I constantly feel it's never enough, and then I'm never enough. That there's never enough time with them, even though I feel like I'm doing all I can for them. And then, even when I'm with them, then I'm feeling anxious or guilty about all the other things that I feel I should be doing. And this becomes a death spiral. A personal and a relational death spiral. And if we don't stop long enough to try and understand what's driving it, it can't change. It's a war within. It's this quest to reach some invisible bar that we are allowing someone else to set for us so that we can feel good about ourselves, so that we can feel like I finally measure up, as if this is the path to tranquility, but it's not. It's a relational and life death spiral. This guy, he couldn't even enjoy what he had, and he didn't know why. And Solomon says, this too is meaningless, and I love this term. It's a miserable business. Like you can put a check in every box, accomplish everything that you want physically, academically, career-wise, your desire and to-do list, you get the reward, you get to the top of your class, you get the promotions, you get everything you strive for, and then you go home and you're miserable. And then you make those around you miserable because something or someone is driving you. And if you're not a Christian or a religious person, I'll just say this, you will never be what you were designed or created to be, or the potential to be, as long as you're looking to the left or the right at what everyone else has or is becoming. And if you're a Christian, this is even more serious, because you'll never experience God's purpose for your life if you're distracted by God's purpose for someone else's life. And this is something I've personally had to battle in my life often. I've had the opportunity to work alongside and be exposed to some, in my arena, just some incredible, well-known pastors and leaders. And I'm embarrassed to admit it. For the first 15 years of ministry, deep down, I was jealous of their gifts and their abilities. Most of the time, I just felt less than, and I felt frustrated. And I was constantly striving for more, and to be more, and ultimately to be something I was not. And about a decade ago, I don't know all the reasons why, but it's like a switch flipped for me. And for the most part, not entirely, I just let go of that and embraced my glorious averageness. And I can tell you, to be able to quit looking to the left and the right and looking into the lanes of what other people are doing and how they're looking and what they're accomplishing, to break free from that comparison trap, it has been so extraordinarily liberating. And it helps you, it enables you and allows you to live better and to work harder, but with more peace, because now you're measuring success differently. Now let me be clear. This remains a battle for me. For example, since leading the launch of New Life just over 8 years ago, about the same time that we were planting New Life, there was another younger leader who was actually coming in from out of town to plant a church here in Wichita. And the simple fact is, they launched larger, they've grown faster, about 3 times faster, their social media is slicker, it's more polished, they're already doing like 2 or 3 services. Just a few weeks ago, they shared how they're looking to get out of rental and move to their own building. And again, because I'm just like you, and that this isn't a problem to solve, but a tension to manage involuntarily, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, there rose up within me jealousy, envy, and insecurity. And from time to time over the past few years, seeing images and what's happening, and most recently hearing about the pending move in a new building, every time I immediately involuntarily find myself fighting off envy and fighting the comparison trap of, well, what's wrong with me? What does this guy have that I don't? Why isn't this or that happening for my church? Like, I want this for my church. Well, it's me. I'm not enough. I'm a failure. This is the war within. So just like you, nearly every day I have the capacity to go there. But I have to say, no, I'm not going there. I'm not going to chase the wind. Because here's the phrase that Solomon began with all this with, because I just gave you the second half. He says, a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. A heart at peace, a sensing of contentment, a sense of, I've done all I know to do, and I've done my very best with who I am and what I have. I can't do more. So I will be content with one handful in tranquility. If you're a Christian, it's got to settle into your mind. God has given you a specific race to run. As a student, as a professional, as a husband or a wife, or as a parent, whatever it might be. God has given me and God has given you a race to run. He's given you a specific lane to run in. So stay there. It's one of the only maybe good times you can tell someone, stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. Live there, because that's where you will thrive. Because the moment you allow envy and comparison and jealousy and overwhelming want to take control, you know what you quit doing? You quit truly caring about other people. Because envy and jealousy becomes extraordinarily self-centered, which means I'm not going to be caring for you the way I should be caring for you if I'm overly worried and concerned about me. The temptation that comes with envy is to begin to use others to somehow fulfill your expectations. And in the comparison trap, the ugly, ugly, embarrassing thing that will pop up every once in a while is when someone else fails or falls short, if there comes this false sense of the lower the person I'm comparing myself to goes, that somehow the higher I get. The less they succeed, well, then the more I succeed. What a lie that is. But that's what envy and jealousy does. And you have been called to live a better life, and so have I. And your better life is found in the lane that God has specifically called you to run in. Sure, it can be good to look at other people for inspiration, but not imitation. Be inspired by their stories, but don't be afraid of their success. People who are eaten up with envy don't even like to hear about other people's success. In other words, count your blessings, not your neighbor's. Maybe one of the best things that you could do is actually sit down and just begin to write out a list or type it up, a list of all the things in your life that are actually a blessing. Because when you count your blessings, you begin to turn the tide of the war within you because you become grateful. And grateful people become generous people. God has called you to a specific life path to experience and to do something specific, but you'll never experience life to the full as long as you're trying to be in the lane of somebody else around you. So starting today and every day after, I just want your mind and your emotions, when you sense them drifting towards that sense of envy and comparison, and I don't measure up, and I'll never have, and I'll never drive, and I'll never live, and I'll never look like that, when you're tempted to compare, that you would just stop and declare, maybe out loud, I will not chase the wind. No envy. I will not allow you to call the shots. In fact, instead of hating him or hating her, tell you what, I'm going to send him a text, an encouraging one. I'm going to send them a note. I'm going to walk in. I'm going to praise them. I'm going to encourage them. Congratulate them on that quality that I just admire, that I kind of wish I had, but I'm glad they've got it. Their success, their achievement. I'm not going to allow envy and jealousy to win. I'm going to cheer them on because God has a path for them that, quite honestly, I don't know any of the real details about, but God does. So I will not chase the wind. And if you're a Christian, Jesus gave you and I some very specific instructions. I'm going to read you the implication and then the instruction. The implication is this: you don't compare yourself to one another. You're to love one another. I've called you to something much higher and greater, and envy always gets in the way of love. This is a critical mission. Jesus said it, and here's the paraphrase. He said, by this people will know that you are my follower. If you love, if you celebrate and cheer on others, refusing to give in to envy or jealousy, and refusing to ever consider yourself better than anyone else, they will know you are mine if you love one another. That's where peace and purpose is found. It's living and staying in your lane to the thing that God has called you to do, and then to celebrate what everyone else is doing and experience, but then to leverage you and your opportunities, the opportunities that come your way, in order to serve and celebrate other people. That's where peace and purpose and tranquility is ultimately found. So this question, and we're done. Is there any area of your life where envy has taken ground in your heart and mind? Is there a relationship in which envy has its hooks in you? Is there an unmet want that is so strong it's causing you to put pressure on the people who are closest to you? Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's an environment. It's school. It's on that team, or it's at work or home. Maybe it's on social media. It's that person you follow or keeps popping up on your feed, and as soon as you see their post, it just stirs up discontent within you about you and about your life. Is there an environment where envy just has buried some grappling hooks into you and set up camp in your heart and mind? How about this? Is there someone who you've dragged into your comparison trap? A husband, a wife, a family member. One of the most insidious things that I've seen far too often is to see a spouse say to another spouse, why can't you be more like so-and-so's husband? Why can't you be more like so-and-so's wife? You know, Tom's wife always, or Tom's wife never, Jenny's husband always, or Jenny's husband never. This needs to never, ever, ever happen in a marriage. And if it does, it needs to stop. And at the root of it is one person dragging another into their comparison game. However envy shows up in your heart, your life, your relationships, you and I, you've got to deal with it. Or you'll end up chasing the wind. And then the longer you chase the wind, the farther you will get from the path that God has marked out for you. And you will suffer. And the most important relationships to you will suffer. You'll never be satisfied or content because, as Solomon said, it is a miserable business. So what is it? Who is it? What is it starting today that maybe you need to remove it from your life, maybe for good? Maybe it's a who. It's time for you to maybe establish some boundaries because they do stir up discontentment in your life. Is there someone in your life who maybe you need to go to and humble yourself and ask forgiveness? Because in your discontentment with you, your envy and your jealousy and in your striving, you've placed a weight on them to be more and do more, which in reality they can't do. And in reality, it's never really been about them. I don't know exactly what your specific application of this message is, but I'm confident that God knows, that God will show you. And my prayer for you is that you will take whatever next step it is to begin to help you win this war within with envy that isn't just hurting you, but the people you love the most. Let me pray for us. And I'll invite the band to come on up. Father, I'm so grateful to you that we have Solomon's words. And I pray for all of us, for this thing that just never goes away and just feels like it's become amplified with social media. So, Father, wherever this lands with every one of us, I pray, God, that you will help us to overcome it, that you will help us to face it, to win against it, and for some of us to finally break free from these hooks that have been in our heart and mind, where we have been comparing ourselves to someone else, or going after this invisible bar rather than embracing who we are, who you've made us to be, and the life you've called us to. I pray all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.